Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. Hi, to the first iteration of the new format of the Meta Roundup. So Meta Roundup 5.1, unlike previous Meta Roundups, instead of just going off of my own experience and, a quick parse of other people's videos, I have started gathering data from all of you guys for the Meta Roundup. If you weren't aware of it, I did a community post when I opened the submissions. I will do this very same thing for the next Abyss. So if you're interested in submitting any Abyss runs for the data, keep an eye out for the community post on YouTube. So anyways, this Abyss, we have for the first time, an HP multiplier in Abyss that is different. So from patch 1.0 to this day, or I guess to the previous Abyss, enemies in Spiral Abyss were 2.5 times tankier than enemies of the same level in the overworld. For this Abyss, they changed that number to 3.75 times, which is 50% tankier. So every enemy in this Abyss is 50% tankier than they would have been in previous Abysses. With one exception, Ruin Drake Earthguards are 3.25 times overworld HP instead of 3.75. Anyways, if you notice that Abyss feels like it's harder than it should be, if you notice that the Consecrated Beasts feel like they take longer to kill than they did previously, that's because they do. They are tankier. Now, does that mean that this Abyss is the hardest Abyss we've ever had? No, not necessarily. Obviously, the health that each enemy has matters, but also the amount of enemies. In terms of amount of enemies, this Abyss is a decent amount lower than most recent Abysses that have had a lot of multi-wave stuff. The only real multi-wave chamber right now, I say real multi-wave because chamber 2 first half doesn't really count. A first wave of 2 Mid-Troll is very squishy. The only real multi-wave chamber is chamber 1. There's 2 waves of single target into 3 waves of 2 targets. Alright, so we have Chamber 1, you have the Consecrated Red Vulture followed by the Scorpion, and they spawn at either end of the chamber. Then, on the second half, you have 2 Hatchlings that spawn in the north, then 2 Breacher Primi. I don't know if it's Primuses or Primi, whatever. 2 Breachers that spawns in the south, and then 2 Praetorian Golems that spawn in the north, so 3 wave. Both the Large Shatterstone, Breacher Primus, and the Praetorian Golem, both of these enemy types have Geoshields, although the Geoshield for the Breacher Primus doesn't really matter that much, but the Praetorian Golem shield gives them a lot of resistances, so breaking that shield stuns them and removes those resistances, which is a pretty big deal. Chamber 2, like I said, you have a very squishy first wave of 2 Mid-Trolls, followed by 2 Ruin Graders. Then on the second half, you have the Plunge Mech, also has a Geoshield that's pretty tanky. And then finally, third chamber, you have 2 Earth Guards on the same wave, they spawn next to each other, and the Legatus Golem with a massive Geoshield. So every single chamber has a Geoshield. Chamber 1, the Geoshield doesn't matter that much, you can kind of ignore it and it's not that big of a deal. But chambers 2 and 3 are rough without breaking the shield. Chamber 2 is effectively impossible without breaking the shield, but the fact that the mech gives you a jump height buff means that you can break it on pretty much every team as long as you're not just a team of 4 units that are catalysts and bow users. As long as you have 1 melee character, you'll be able to break it just from plunges. But then the Legatus Golem has a lot less resistances than the mech, but still very, very high resistances. It has 90% base resistances, which is really high. When your resistances are above 75%, the formula is slightly different. So it doesn't mean you're doing 10% damage, it's closer to like 20, but it's still a lot of damage being reduced. So you want to either break the shield, which shreds resistances, or bring a lot of res shred, because 90% is a lot. This makes it so that in this Abyss, there are not that many teams that are good on the second chamber. When I was looking at the submissions, pretty much 90% of the submissions either had Zhongli, who can single-handedly shred the Geoshields very quickly, or were a team that is pretty good at breaking the shield. What kinds of teams are good at breaking the shields? Overload teams, so either Chagrin's teams or Overvape teams, Shao teams, and Geo teams. And then the only exception to that was teams that had a lot of res shred, which is mainly the new Kazuha Shalonen core that shreds 76% of the resistances. You can break the shield with just a Claymore attack by attacking it for a while, but it's pretty slow. So characters like Kinich, or if you're using a team that uses Daya as a support, you can kill the Legatus Golem, but it will be noticeably more difficult than if you were doing something else. So that's something to keep in mind. And then for the first half, you want something that is ideally able to clear Chamber 1 as as fast as possible. If you're using a team that can break the Legatus Golem's shield without it being too slow, Chamber 3 is pretty much trivial. The Legatus Golem, when it's knocked down, has really low resistances, which means that as long as you can break the shield without too much of a problem, the chamber is actually relatively easy compared to the other chambers. The mech shields back up in a way that's a lot more annoying, and the chamber 1 just has such a big HP pool in AoE on multi-wave. And then on top of that, the first halves of chambers 2 and 3 are significantly easier than the first half of chamber 1. Each consecrated beast has over 1 million HP, so having a team that's focused on single target but that can still somewhat deal with these chambers is generally what I'd recommend. If you don't have a good way to kill the Legatus Golem through his shield and you're just stuck with a team that isn't particularly good against it, then focusing on chamber 3 and putting a good AoE team on your first setup and a good single target team on your second is also a viable option. The main reason why I would generally recommend going for a single target team is because not only is like the first half pretty tanky, but like the second half of chamber 1 in my opinion is by far the harshest half in this abyss. Unless you have a really good AoE team, it's rough. And so being able to speedrun the hell out of the first half will give you more time on the second half, which is just going to be nice. If you're trying to get it clear as fast as possible on the first half of Chamber 1, the Consecrated Beasts have higher resistances than most enemies. They have 40% base resistances instead of 10, which means that without Resistance Shred, you do a lot less damage. If you have Resistance Shred, it matters a lot more for Consecrated Beasts than it does for the default enemy, which means teams that run Resistance Shred, whether it's VV, whether it's Deepwood, whether it's Shalonen, generally will feel a lot better against a Consecrated Beast than teams that don't. That's another thing you can keep in mind. If we look at the most popular characters through the submissions, we have Farina at number 1. Next up is Shalonen. Then we have Bennett, Xiangling, Fischl, Kazuha, Yelan, Nahida, Xingqiu, Raiden, Zhongli, Chevreuse, Farazan, Neuvillette, Navia, Xianyun, Ayaka. Things that are standing out that are not necessarily unexpected, but different than what you'd expect on an average abyss. Chevreuse and Farazan are quite high. Noelle is quite high. Total of 17 Noelle submissions. Ayaka is surprisingly high. Ayaka is relatively high because first sight is freezable. Consecrated Beasts aren't the best matchup for Ayaka, but they're also not that bad. When you look at a relatively high investment Amenoma Ayaka team that isn't like full premium with all the good stuff, it's generally difficult for Ayaka to one-rotate the Consecrated Beasts before the buffs. In most situations, they ended up with like 20% HP remaining, which made your rotations awkward. So you kind of needed a second rotation to kill them anyways. Now, with the enemies being 50% tankier, the amount of rotations you need to kill them is pretty much the same amount at that level of investment, which means that it's, because Ayaka is a team that is like very affected by HP breakpoints, it does relatively well against the Scorpion. I guess we can take a look at some of the submissions.
Unleash!
Oh, where?
There's bidding! Hold the line! My opponent! Embrace the ice!
We've got a... yeah.
Manifest!
Fallen leaves.
So as we can see, we do about half of the enemy's HP with a rotation. It wasn't a perfect rotation, but this is one of the best good builds run, so non-whale runs. So obviously the build is going to be really, really strong with Shenhe, Kazuha, Kokomi. If we look at one of the slightly lower investment submissions... Anyways.
Look at you, Bootown!
As one with wind and cloud.
Delved into destiny, decided by destiny. Embrace the ice!
Yeah, so if you look at the damage you do with one rotation, it's about half of the Consecrated Beast HP. A little bit over half if you're looking at higher investment stuff, or if you're looking at like a slightly better team, maybe sacrifice some defensive utility. Before the HP change, this would have been like 75%, 80%. The enemy would have had like 20-ish% HP left, but you can't really kill them. You have to either just auto them for a while or use another burst, which means that for Ayaka at like decently high investment, but still no whale stuff, the HP thresholds are a lot more favorable, so she doesn't get affected by them as much. And then Chambers 2 and 3 are AoE, which Ayaka is relatively good at. So Ayaka is especially nice this abyss. But honestly, outside of Any Shogun's team on the second side, then Xiao, Navia, Noelle, Ito, or any team that can slot in Zhongli without too much of an issue. You don't really want to play other things on the second side. I think the best teams for the Legatus Golem are the ones that either break the shield with Zhongli very quickly, so if you do a hold E into burst on Zhongli, then the next hold E will be enough, so it takes 12 seconds to break the shield, which is not that slow. Slows down your rotations, obviously, because you have to wait 12 seconds in between, but it means that you can do all your rotations while the enemies are down. That's your first option. The other option is you do a rotation while the enemy is not down. Legatus Golem's resistances are high, but not as high as the Gravity Mech, and so you can just do a normal rotation while its shield is up. If you have some Res Shred, you'll still do reasonable damage. And the better teams for doing that are the ones that can do a rotation while also damaging the shield. That's why Xiao is pretty good, because you can do one rotation to break the shield and then another rotation while it's down, and you can alternate like that. Same with Chevaleur's teams, although the Pyro Carry Chevaleur's teams that use non-C6 Fischl as their Electro are going to struggle to break the shield quickly because your Electro application just won't be fast enough. Other than that, really there's not that much else to say. Chamber 1 is the hardest. It's the one you should be focusing on. Having a decent AoE team is going to make a world of difference on the second side. And then if you find yourself struggling, doing Chamber 1 and then resetting, changing your teams for Chambers 2 and 3 is a viable option. Let's do a clear to showcase some of the tips. In the first chamber, at the very beginning, you have two options. You can either immediately run towards the Consecrated Beast that will spawn here and start attacking it, or you can run backwards because if you're far away from it, its first attack is going to be the one where it flies up and then falls down on you. And this is where the second beast will spawn. I generally tend to prefer doing that, so that's what we're going to do. If you go close enough to the wall, you can make it so that the vulture won't move too much. It will still move a decent amount. You can't prevent it from moving altogether unless you stagger it, but if you stand between the vulture and the wall, it will generally stay around the same area.
Stay put. Dissipate. Ring cutter. Propagate. No, my soul. Let me lead you first. Germinate. Drain outlines your fate. Stand with me. Go get it, Sealand. Stay put. Propagate. Ring cutter. I'll settle this. Know my sword. Witness his power. Stand with me. Hands right to see 'em. Going in. Let's light it up. Oz reveals us.
I'm an idiot. I forgot to fucking hold E on her.
No rest for the wicked.
Off we go. Teamwork is shadow wing. You asked. Going in. Nice and slick. I
There we f***ing go. Finally. Okay.
Rain outlines you. Terrified. Terminate. Let me lead you. Body and propagate.
Starting without burst here is a little annoying, but we'll survive.
Out of my way. Go away. Ring cutter. No, my sword. You play. Here, I'll settle this. Get with me. Propagate.
I don't want to ult here. I think it's
Rain
fine.
outlines your face.
Actually, it might not be fine.
Justice will prevail. Drop your weapon. Teamwork is dreamwork. You're toast. Nice and spicy. Final warning. U.S. Going in. Shadow Let's light it up. Everybody, stop right there. Hands right. Going in. Let's light it up. Let's light it up.
I probably should have commentated a little bit more. Oh well.
Everybody stand. Librarian Recruit, drop your weapons. Nice and spicy.
On Chamber 2, just stay where you spawn for the Minotaur, and they'll run towards you, and that's where the Rune Graders spawn. And then on the second side, it's just a matter of breaking the shield as fast as possible. If you have an attack that applies Pneuma, be careful, because if you attack the Gravity Mech with Pneuma while it's down, it's gonna disable it, and then it's gonna do one attack, and then it's gonna shield back up. But if you don't attack it, it does 2 attacks before it shields back up. So ideally, in a perfect world, if you have Pneuma, what you want to do is you want to let it do its first attack while its shield is gone, then the second attack, and then right as it's about to end, you apply Pneuma, and then it's going to do another attack before it shields back up. So you get 3 attacks worth of uptime. But there's a lot of characters where you can't really control when your Pneuma hit happens, like Lenny, for example. He just gets it. You don't really have a choice. Neuvillette, you want to use your E, so it's like, yeah. The character which can control it the best is Farina, because her N1 is entirely optional. So swapping to healing mode, attacking once, and then swapping back right as it's about to shield back up is going to extend your uptime. Then we get the last chamber. They can either go backwards or forwards at the start. If they both go backwards, you just say fuck it and you'd leave. Ideally, you want them to stay grouped, but there's a certain amount of RNG involved in their attack pattern, so it's very possible that you don't actually have control over it. If that's the case, then it is what it is. You just accept it and move on. If you want to reset, you can. Yeah. And then the Ligatus Golem, it just has a tanky ass shield. There's really not too much to say. If you don't have C6 official, the downtime is going to be a little bit more rough. Or sorry, the shield breaking is going to be a little bit more difficult than if you do. But the nice thing about Traverses is that you can do a rotation while breaking the shield. This guy moves a lot, by the way. There's not really much you can do about that. But it's really not too big of a problem as long as you have a good way to break the shield. As you can see, with teams tailored towards second and third chamber, chamber 1 was by far the most difficult. In any case, I very much appreciate all of the submissions that we got. Not only does it give me a better idea of what people like to play in a given abyss, but it's also just really nice to have a bunch of submissions to go through if I want to look at people's runs. And it's also really nice for some of the viewers that have a team that they like, but they don't really know exactly how they should be playing it on a given chamber. They can go to the submissions, and if you make a copy of this, you can head to the query tab and you can look up something. So if, let's say I'm an Ito main, I don't know what exactly Ito team I should make. You can go Ito, maybe you exclude the whales, and then you have some Ito teams with the links to people's clears if you want to take a look at them. So it's really nice as a resource for you guys and as a source of data collection for me. Keep an eye out for this community post that will be posted on the day the next abyss drops. If you're willing to submit one of your runs, make sure you check the way you're supposed to submit them. Thanks to one of my viewers, Watchful, who set up the sheet and the Google Forms to make this a lot more easier to get through. I heavily appreciate that. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this meta roundup. As usual, I hope you learned a thing or two. Hope you had a nice time watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.